Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, welcome to another Hearthstone deck guide. I am JoRoSaR, and today we're going to be talking a little bit about Rogue and the Old Gods from the Whispers of the Old Gods expansion. The meta constantly evolving at the moment, a lot faster than normal because of so many decks that have now become viable. And Rogue is a particularly interesting class to talk about, because Rogue in standard mode now is nothing like it used to be. Oil Rogue was incredibly efficient, you had a really nice reliable one-turn kill mechanic, and many more or less proclaimed the Rogue dead after Blade Flurry nerfing. You can see here to my right, we've got it up to 4 mana now, and we've removed the ability to hit face with Blade Flurry, which just combines so well with Oil. But luckily, like with Druid, as you saw in my last video here, the Old Gods have breathed new life into Valeera, and we're going to take a look at a couple of the decks potentially on offer with the new expansion out. There are 2 decks in particular, and there are going to be 2 videos, by the way, one on each of these. We're going to first be looking at N'Zoth the Corruptor to my immediate right, but there is also another video featuring C'Thun as well, so make sure you check that out on the GosuGamers Hearthstone channel. And both of these gods, of course, were released with the recent Hearthstone expansion, and both of them have actually found their way into some pretty interesting Rogue builds, but completely different Rogue builds. And I'm going to talk about N'Zoth in particular, because it utilizes so many really awesome deathrattle minions that are currently in rotation in standard mode. And unlike C'Thun, this behaves like a classic mid-range rogue. And you play minions, you establish trades, you extract value from your deathrattles, and you sacrifice your big deathrattle threats and return them to the board through N'Zoth for the ultimate board of doom. So we're going to take a look at some of these cards in detail, but before we do, there are a lot of deathrattle minions that kind of disappeared from the current meta, and that's simply because they were out of rotation in standard. So Haunted Creeper, Sludge Belcher, Piloted Shredder, and Sky Golem to a lesser extent, and yes, Dr. Boom is in here as well, because don't forget, Boom bots are deathrattle, are all fantastic cards, but none of them are playable. But there are still a bucket load of awesome minions, and some of them are from the new expansion. Now, players have already experimented with deathrattle rogues because when League of Explorers came out, Unearthed Raptor was released, which was a lot of fun and was played, but not necessarily consistently at the highest level. And now there are a whole bunch of new kids on the block, which aim to make deathrattle rogue work. And here they are on the screen now. The main cards you're looking at that are completely new are Zeratul, Twilight Summoner, and Undercity Huckster. And of course N'Zoth, for bringing them all back from the dead. And they play very well with Unearthed Raptor, with Loot Hoarder, with Clean Bloodhoof, with Sylvanas, and the list kind of goes on. So the primary goal of the N'Zoth Rogue Deathrattle deck plays as follows. It's pretty similar to the way the deck used to play. You curve out your mid-range minions, you gain tempo, and you apply pressure on your opponent. And if your opponent isn't dead by turn 10, well then you play N'Zoth and make him or her concede. It's that simple. And to give you an idea of how this deck plays, it's quite easy to pilot to start to learn, and of course there'll then be some more subtle plays as well, is to take a look at the early game. You tend to have Loot Hoarders, Undercity Hucksters. Edwin Van Cleef actually is quite a fun combo card to play out early on. Your SI7 agent as well. And of course you have your Unearthed Raptor. So all these cards are designed to gain tempo and gain that board control in the early game. And Unearthed Raptor in particular is a really cool card with lots and lots of interaction. So in the early game, for example, you've got Loot Hoarder and your Huckster for accelerated card draw, and then in the mid game, you might be looking at copying the deathrattle of your Twilight Summoner, or Sylvanas, or Ken, or any one of a number of cards. But one important thing to note when playing this deck, don't hold your Unearthed Raptor for the mid-game cards. If you've got it in your hand, play it. There's no bad value in this deck, and you're just trying to get as much board control early on as possible. So 9 times out of 10, just try and play your Unearthed Raptor early on, rather than sort of hold it and tactically not use up your mana. And in the mid-game, you'll have cards like Shadowcaster and Twilight Summoner. They really shine, and even though they look very slow, they pay out big time. Just because you also have N'Zoth to bring them back. Ken and Sylvanas as well are 2 minions that you absolutely want to play, and then you kind of want dead. Not just to trigger their really good death rattles, but to feed N'Zoth's effect. And we get to see some of those cards here. So here are some of your late game. Zarel, very, very useful with those Toxin cards popping out as well. And as you can see, the Twilight Summoner is so dangerous. It summons a 5/5, and then if you can just go ahead and pop that again, that's going to be fantastic for you. The Shadowcaster, of course, can copy and potentially produce another 1/1 Twilight Summoner, and that, as you can imagine, will continue to fuel N'Zoth's effect. Sylvanas and Cairn, of course, another 2 cards that's fantastically well with Shadowcaster, and there are just so many good combinations that the idea is once you've managed to grab control of the board in the early game, playing these out tends to be quite natural, quite easy, and very, very difficult for your opponent to stop. So now we're going to go ahead and take a look at a number of lists. Now, we have a couple of deck lists here. There are 3 in total. The one that you see on your far left is from Sottle, the one in the middle is from Dog, and the one on the right is from Trump. So go ahead and pause the video to check out these deck lists if you want to construct them yourself in-game. But there are a couple of key differences between them that I want to run you through. In Sottle's deck list, there's absolutely no fancy stuff. You just want to get as much value in each card as possible. So you've got double Sap, you've got double Fan of Knives, just to be able to get board control and tempo early on. Very, very to the point, and very easy to play as well. Dog's deck in the middle plays very similarly overall. You have a Dark Eye and Skulker replacing a Fan of Knives, which I'm actually personally quite a big fan of, and a Defender of Argus as well, which is interesting because it makes sure your opponent's attack into the deathrattle minions that you want dead. So it's not giving them any 2 ways about it, and forces them not to ignore the minions on the board. And then finally, on your right-hand side, we have Trump over here. We have 2 Southsea Squid faces, and that enhances your hero power removal capabilities because it adds to your weapon as well in terms of damage. And you've also got 2 Tomb Pillagers for just a little bit of extra coin value. But where you'll probably notice the big difference in Trump's deck as well is that you have 2 Sprints. If I go ahead and lean over here, you can see that number right there. So you never end up running out of cards on top of all the other card draws that you have. So this, in summary, is a list of a number of decks that you can play with N'Zoth now that the Whispers of the Old God expansion is out, and there are a lot of really cool combinations that you can play with some of these Old Gods. We'll be experimenting with this deck, but also with JoRoSaR in a future video. So I hope you guys have enjoyed this brief introduction to the N'Zoth Deathrattle Rogue. There is also, of course, a video on the JoRoSaR Rogue. Make sure you check that out as well. And go ahead and follow us at GosuGamers HS on Twitter. I'm at JoRoSaR on Twitter as well. Make sure you let us know your feedback on these deck guides and maybe what deck you'd like to see us produce next. For now, though, enjoy laddering, and I'll see you next time.